Thank you very much for joining us on the Voice of Job Seekers. This is Mark, and welcome. If you have any questions about the podcast, feel free to give us a call here at 708-365-9822. If you want to text or call, leave a message on the voicemail. That'll be great. You can also go to thevoiceofjobseekers.com, press the send voicemail button, and it'll activate your microphone on your laptop, and then you can just leave a message right there, and I'll pick it up. In the meantime, I want to introduce to you once again Lavie Margolin. Lavie has written another book. This time it's job interviews, mastering the job interview. And actually, that's just one title, Mastering the Job Interview. Welcome back to the show, Lavie. How are you?
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. I'm great, and love to speak to you again and reach your listeners.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much. Back to interviewing. This is your, I believe this is your second, this is like a third book for you as far as interviewing, because you had one where you had 500 questions, and then you had a very unique title to another book. Could you give me that title once more?
Sure. Sometimes I lose track myself.
Yeah.
Let's see. I believe one of them that was interesting was winning the salary negotiation.
Right. Yeah, that was on salary negotiation. But then you had another one, and it had a lot to do with the Jewish culture.
Oh, yes. Thank you. It was called Can I Wear My Kippah on Job Interviews? Career Guidance for Sabbath Observant Jewish Professionals. That was actually how I got started in the career counseling arena. I worked for an organization that helped to support the unique needs of religious individuals and what they should consider, for example, before accepting an offer when they would discuss the needs for Sabbath observance. So that was really a labor of love, and I was glad to get that one out there.
Well, when I first saw I just saw the title just recently, funny enough, and you said that was like the first of your series on interviewing. That's really cool to have something that specific and that niche for a specific audience, and for it to be a labor of love. I'm sure a lot of people found a lot of value in it, and that I just saw that and I was just elated for a lot of different reasons. It gave me some ideas. But, I guess we could talk about interviewing until we're blue in the face. But in your estimation and in your view, interviewing, has it changed in the last 5 years or so? And if so, how much? And we're not talking about just the actual asking questions and getting answers, but there is a perspective that a job seeker has to take a different type of look at the interview process, isn't it?
Yes. I think there's a couple of factors that stand out to me of how interviewing has changed, and it's more about the process of interviewing. I think one of the things, and you'll probably note this as well, is that when job aggregators like Indeed.com first came out, it was sort of like our little secret to tell job seekers, and this light bulb went on, and this was a number of years ago. And in the last 5 years, resources like Indeed have become the standard. Instead of going to a Monster or a Career Builder and searching for jobs there, the Indeed has become the first portal. And what that really has done is that's increased the number of opportunities in front of job seekers, and in turn, the number of listings that they're applying to. So I believe companies have a lot more applicants. And in turn, what they're doing is they're considering a bit more, but what they're doing to maximize their time and potential fit is scheduling a lot more interviews that aren't taking place in person. So you're having to jump through an extra hoop and be prepared for either a phone interview, which are still being going on and the standard, but also the remote interview, whether it's via Skype or another platform of a conferencing tool, you have to get through in order to even make it to the first in-person interview, even if you're a local candidate.
Yeah, I've experienced with clients I've had, the first interview was more of the employer going after the low-hanging fruit. There was a particular time when the first call was actually a couple of questions and then finding out what the salary is. And of course, fortunately, we'd prepared for the question coming early. And it was such as, we can't move forward unless we discern what salary that you need. Well, the person had an inside scoop on what the salary was, so he was able to give a fairly decent range to get to the next round. But are you finding it common that the salary issues kind of the first one of the first screening questions that you're getting? I'm finding it a mix, but what are you finding?
I think that's a great point. I think it depends on the role of what we consider the interviewer. Oftentimes, if it's someone outside the organization, like a headhunter role, if they still use that term, or an outside recruiter, or even an internal recruiter, they're sort of checking off boxes and very concerned about that just to make sure that you're the right fit. Sometimes if it's less of a structured, sort of multi-pronged interview process where it might be the hiring manager or the department supervisor that's just doing a phone screening or phone interview to see if it's appropriate for you to come in, they're going to focus less on that, I found.
Yeah. Yeah, I just thought like I said, we prepared for that question, but it was like the third question in the interview, and I haven't seen one since like that in the time that since I think it's about a year ago that one of my clients had that actually happen. But yeah, finding that two interviews, a screening interview and then an actual phone interview happens before you actually see a real person is quite common. So
what's been nice, and I've seen trending a little bit, is that some systems, Boston was even in the process, if they've not made it officially yet, of certain opportunities that you actually have to list the salary range, which I think would be great for not only the job seekers, but for companies, in that everyone's able to utilize their time most effectively and the right fit, and no one's disappointed at the end.
Yeah. Yeah. I just, you almost have to also be ready to have a mindset for a mental state of toughness to endure not only the longevity of the hiring process, but also to not to be so miffed by some of the questions that are meant to exclude you more than include you. So finding that pretty interesting. What are job seekers, or what are successful job seekers, from your view again, are using to leverage better responses? Do you find that people are practicing a little bit more? I think now people are getting a little bit a sense that there's much more preparation than just walking in and winging it. I get the impression that people are understanding that that they should be prepared to answer any question, and not so much the set questions that we tend to ask, like, how did you get interested in this position? Tell me about yourself. Those kinds of questions.
Yes, I think preparation continues to be important and is increasing, and I've even seen it. Students are aware of that. Undergraduate college students are aware of that importance. I remember more than 15 years ago. I guess it's been a while. 17 years ago, maybe, I had my first internship with Marvel Comics, and the interview process, I sort of did my best, but I don't know if I extensively prepared for it, or I'm not even sure if I would have known how to. And I'm sure I made some mistakes, but it worked out. But now, just with opportunities being able to be accessed, like I mentioned, online, it's just more competitive, even for a very entry-level internship or job. One of the important aspects is not only being prepared to promote yourself well and answer several questions that are asked, but really understand the needs of the company. Somebody that, an accountant even, has to be prepared to answer different questions for an accounting firm as they would for an accounting role within a department. Just understanding what's the right fit, what do you want to use to maximize your time. And as you mentioned, really getting into the interviewing mindset as opposed to being prepared to answer hundreds of questions, which are in the book, but, for illustrative purposes, but really understand the mindset of thinking about why are these type of questions being asked, what's the best way to answer that, and putting your best foot forward.
Yeah. So are creative answers, I mean, we've heard about creative questions, and we've seen them, we've experienced them at some point. If you haven't experienced it, you haven't done enough interviewing. But how about the more creative answers? And I'm not talking about the snide remarks or the snippy comebacks. Are they useful in giving responses to employers?
I think creativity is an interesting word because you certainly have to be creative when thinking about what are the needs of the company and what you have to bring to the table. So it might be a very small element of what you've done or your knowledge, but if you're able to promote it honestly, but in a way that shows that you have that knowledge or you have that skill or you've given that example in a creative way, then that's great. But just being creative for creative sake, I don't think that will promote you better. Just by using the word creative, I'm thinking about something like an advertising agency, right? Sometimes we'll see an ad on TV and we're like, wow, that was a beautiful message, a beautiful ad, but it doesn't want to make you purchase the product. Mm-hmm. And some ads, they're sort of like, well, we fix leaks. And you're like, well, that wasn't very well done, but that actually sold the product. So in the same way, we're promoting ourselves, and the answers that work most effectively are those that interest the company and want to make them hire us.
Well, and that's a great analogy. I'd never thought about that. It is a running billboard, if you will, from the time that you're the beginning of the conversation to the end of the conversation, that it is a series of ads, and you're selling yourself, but you're not trying so hard not to sell. The points, I think, if I were to think of some of the ads that running recently, they're more telling you about the value of the particular product than they are about just saying that I'm great, I'm wonderful. You look at the new Sprint commercials. They took the old guy that used to be with Verizon, and now he's appearing in Sprint, and he's saying that there's only 1% difference. And it's like, wow. You go, man, there's such a small difference. Why am I still with Verizon? It makes you question. And I think it's sort of a competitive edge that you begin to make other people think about the question, why am I considering others when this guy is saying, it breaks it down so simple, it's a compelling argument automatically. I mean, does that make sense?
Yes, and I really like the example that you used, because in that example, they're not feeling the need to say that they're better in every aspect. They're actually conceding that they're a little bit behind in one, but they're explaining why it's not a big deal and all of the other elements that they bring to the table to make the overall best product.
Right, absolutely. So I think one of the things that I find a little tough to coach people on, not that my part is trying to help people get a perspective on, but when people get to the end of interviews, closing out seems to be even a little bit more of a challenge. It may be more of a mental challenge than anything else.
I think people are hoping for an offer, even though that's very unlikely to happen. And in the first interview, I would be a little bit concerned if you had received an offer before you leave the table, kind of thinking, sure, what type of company is this, and why are they so ready to jump into things before they know me so well? But once you get beyond the questions phase. And as you know, an important element of that is not thinking, well, now it's my time to ask questions like, what's the salary, or how many hours is it a week, or what days can I take off, but more using it as the opportunity to ask pointed questions that show your knowledge about the company and show your curiosity and demonstrate what you can contribute. Beyond that, when they say, thank you for coming, thanks very much, I'm really interested in this opportunity, do X and Y, what would be the next steps in the process? And really that's the key sentence to ask so that you understand. Are you going to sit home and anticipate an offer? If you were to hear back, what would be the timeline? Once you're provided with a timeline, then you know an appropriate point as to when you can follow up. If you're told that you'll hear back within a week and a half later wouldn't be inappropriate to say, hey, I'm still interested. I remember you mentioned that I would hear back. Just wanted to see if I can provide any additional information. You're constantly moving it through the process until it comes to either a positive resolution or a stopping point.
Yeah, I really, I think people need to spend more time on what to say in that end part to make sure that they have clarity about every aspect. I think there are times, and it may be, I don't know, that there are times when I think there might have been my lack of coaching in, not being clear on how to make sure that they're asking the right questions at the end, that they're actually being able to make sure that all the questions are answered, or even if they have a hunch that they didn't answer one or two of the questions from the earlier within that particular conversation, that they can go back and say, hey, let me go back and ask let me just make sure I was clear about this question that you asked before. And it does take a little bit of mental endurance to be able to do that, but I think people need to find more of a better way. One is taking notes, for sure. Taking notes probably will never, be is one of the best strategies you can use within that conversation. But I think that people are finding that the end is the toughest part. And I can understand that because you're trying to, everything is a whirlwind and things are going so fast. And if you have a panel interview, you're trying to field questions from 2, 3, 4, 5 other people.
Right. And I think your point actually speaks to sort of rethinking or reframing the whole interview. Partly the interview can feel like an interrogation, like watching an episode of Law and Order, and you're just responding to the questions asked. Yeah. But if given the context to respond in a way that allows you to ask further questions and actually turn it into a professional conversation, there won't be that awkward end to the interview because you're asking follow-up questions along the way in the interview. Now, some interviewers are less receptive to that, and you have to be able to gauge the temperature in the room right away to see if that's welcome. But if it seems like that's going well, then the end isn't so awkward because you're actually having the opportunity to share ideas and ask questions throughout, which allows you to reframe the interview more as colleagues than an interrogation.
Right. So in your book, this particular time, you're talking about mastering the job interview process, and it's not just good enough to be able to weather the storm anymore. You have to be able to turn the interrogation into a conversation, and it might be a little tough when the interviewer is not trained on interviewing. Do you find that there are any particular strategies, maybe one or two, that people can use to turn it to where it becomes something much more engaging and respectful?
Sure. One of the things that I would always do is ask for clarity if there seems like a point or something that the interviewer is driving at, but it's not clear where they're going with it. For example, they might say that we need people that are real leaders here. Give me examples of your leadership. And you always want to answer their questions first unless you need clarity before asking a follow-up question. So once you do that, you might say, I understand. I hope those examples were helpful. I understand that leadership is very important here. can you give me an example about when one would use their leadership skills in this role? And, if they have one to give, you can follow up with that and explain why that's something of interest to you, or you have similar experience, or that's something you're looking to gain, so that, oftentimes when a question is asked, we sort of try and figure out why it's being asked, and then we try and give an answer that's on point. But if we don't understand exactly why it's being asked, it's hard to be on target. So the more clarity that you ask for, the better, especially when you're providing the information first.
Right. So what are some of the maybe the biggest takeaways from your book in writing it? And I'm sure you probably came away with a better understanding of the process. But what would you say would be one or two of the biggest takeaways at this particular point that someone's going to get from reading this? And again, we're talking about mastering it. We're not just talking about going through the process.
Right. So it's having a black belt on the cover, nothing that I'm close to in my short judo stance. But when you think about it in a sports analogy, the game or the match isn't won or lost during the actual match. It's what happens beforehand, and in certain elements, what happens afterwards. So the most important takeaway is to understand not just to prepare for that interview or that situation, but to prepare well beforehand, to understand the company, to prepare for that phone interview or remote interview, and then what to do in terms of following up appropriately afterwards, and even negotiating the salary. Because every step, you're establishing your professionalism and your rapport, and things can go off a little bit, if it's a challenge in terms of coordinating the interview time, or even the way that you're communicating beforehand, or even afterwards. How are you following up effectively? For example, I had a client that his interview went well for a help desk position, but he was so excited that he left 3 messages before the company had even had the chance to call him back. And it kind of scared them a little bit. Now, whether I ever did that in an interview, or more likely when I was in the dating scene, I won't admit to. But right. There's a lot of comparables that can happen. You have what appears to be a good experience, and you just want to take that enthusiasm and you want to put it into action. But sometimes you just have to understand how a process plays out and how that comes across to others.
Right. That's a good analogy. Fantastic. Yeah, that's I think self-control is one of those attributes that we rarely talk about, but it does apply. But thank you so much for joining us here on The Voice of Job Seekers, Lavie. Your book again, Mastering the Job Interview. It is now available, correct? It's available on Amazon?
Yes.
It is available.
It's available on Amazon.
And encourage you to go to the reviews to check it out, and also check out his back catalog as well. I found personally the salary negotiation book really useful, and actually put a call into Lavie. You can get help with the client once. I think it was a couple of years ago now, but definitely a lot of great value. Thank you so much, Lavie.
Thank you.
And the rest of you, thank you very much for joining us on The Voice of Job Seekers. We'll be back next week at another show. If you have any questions, feel free to contact me at thevoiceofjobseekers.com. You all have a great week.